Two. Back at it again. It's the State of Football, part 23, brought to you by the NFLDraftBible.com. I'm your co-host, Rick Saratella, telling it like it is when it comes to the NFL draft and everything football. It's what we do here on the State of Football, your new home for real football talk in the morning. We appreciate everybody hopping on board and buckling up 2 times. It's a double chin strap kind of party. That's because we have my co-host John Murphy in the house down there in New Orleans. Of course, the VP over at Toronto Argonauts, joining me each and every morning here on the State of Football. David Turner's in the building. Always good to see him out in Arizona. Maverick Sports Consulting, fresh off the podcast recording last night. Up early in the morning. Where's your coffee, David? I don't see it. And Barry Roberts, of course, no stranger to the show. Bro Gator in the building. Magnolia Capital Partners. Make sure you go check them out. And we're going to dive deep into football conversation here in the morning. Waking up here, I am seeing Kirk Cousins is trending on the Twitterverse, and we find out that Kyle Brandt of the NFL Network, I guess, conducted a podcast here with Kirk Cousins, who was not wearing a mask, a sight that we've seen actually quite often on the NFL Network broadcasts when they kind of go around the league and give us a bird's eye view inside the training camps across the country. So the big news here, I guess, that the media is making is, he didn't want to wear a mask. Kyle Brandt asking, hey, where do you stand with the mask policy? And Kirk Cousins basically saying, I don't believe in it. And if I die, I die. And, it's not being well received around the country this morning, John. So I'll start off with you. Your take here. The $35 million quarterback in Minnesota.
Yeah, if his Ivan Drago, like, if I die, I die kind of comment, okay, but, I guess there have been some times where, if Vikings fans would wish he had kept his mask off, and not been able to play on a random Sunday. But, hey, if that's your take, then my interest level will be, you saw in a totally other sport, the Cleveland Indians literally traded one of their 10 best players because they went out and did something COVID related, then doubled down on their story, and the rest of the players, including a few veterans who were spare parts, but still veterans in the locker room, said, yeah, you know what? If that's how you're going to treat this and handle it, I'm out. And instead, the Indians sent those 2 guys to their alternate camp and ended up trading one of them. So, my interest level is Kirk Cousins has every right to have an opinion and live his life how he decides to do it. Now, how will the Vikings respond, and how will some of the Vikings players respond if you're sitting there and you're saying, well, I'm giving up all of this, I'm staying away from my family, or, I've opted in, will there be a response back in terms of, will any of them say, well, like, wait a minute, if that's how he's treating it, are they okay with that? Or will you see any pushback, from either A, the organization, or B, the players? Because now you're talking about the coaches he interacts with, the whole quarterback room. We've joked about, like, with your quarterbacks, will they keep you on 3 different floors, or keep the 3rd string quarterback, in Wisconsin or, Chicago or somewhere else, to keep you away from everybody. Whereas you have your main guy telling you, well, I'm comfortable living my life and it's survival of the fittest. And if I get COVID, nothing's going to happen to me, and stuff like that, which is highly unlikely, since, the one thing you can't say about Kirk Cousins is that he's not turnover prone. So in all likelihood, Kurt, if you do get it, you will probably turn it over to one of your teammates.
Oh, gotta love how you bring it back around again there, John Murphy. Let's go over to David Turner, obviously the leader of the team when you play the quarterback position, and he's probably using the logic. I'm not justifying it, but I'm just trying to put myself in Kurt's shoes. Hey, we're all being tested. No one's positive. Why do I have to wear a mask?
Well, I think you're going to see this coming up really quick, actually, on not just on sports, but in life in general. It's mask fatigue. I mean, people are getting fatigued of putting the mask on, making sure that they're being diligent and staying, true to it, because they don't see it as helping them. So many of these studies have come out and said these masks don't protect me. And you know what? A lot of what I've read, it's not protecting you, it's protecting everybody from you. So, it's really doing something unselfishly for the rest of society by wearing these masks and staying diligent on it. But I think you are going to see mask fatigue really quick here in the rest of society everywhere around. The other part of this, though, as a organization, I mean, I can say if I was the head of this organization, Kurt would be in my room this morning. I'd be like, listen, I don't care what you do on your personal time if it doesn't affect this team, but there's a mandate league-wide that we are going to do these things here, and we're going to do them right, and we're going to do it the right way. And if you're not on board with that, let me know, because we're collecting all these players to surround you with talent. We've gone out and got the defense stacked up. We're trying to make a run at this thing, and if you can't get on board with the plan the organization has as the main trigger caller, let me know now, because we're early enough where maybe we can do something about it. Because I'm not going to sit here all season and have this conversation with you. Your personal choices out the door when you're an employee. I mean, people have to understand, as a business owner and people who are in charge of leading the business, you got to have these tough conversations with these guys sometimes and just crack the nuts, because at this time, it's like you can't do it. You can't have some rogue player going out collecting COVID at a key position like quarterback, and then having to sit him 2 or 3 weeks because he's on COVID the list. I mean, this isn't a backup left tackle. This isn't a backup, safety here. This is your main chief guy. If I get it, I die. Whatever, Drago. You got to be more responsible. You have the keys to the car. You're driving the car. You're the main cog in this thing. We can't have that attitude at that position.
Well, Saturday is a big day, not only because it's NFL roster cuts, but also because that's when the daily COVID testing is scheduled to end. I don't know if the NFLPA is going to renegotiate that for longer. But Barry, I'll go over to you, because the NFL does have, and the NFLPA does have, very strict protocol that if you do violate these rules and these guidelines, the NFL can fine you. They can fine you heavily. And we saw the Seahawks take action against the undrafted free agent. He was out of the building the next day. A few days later, the Titans' first round pick, you hear he's out at a campus party, no discipline at all. Will the NFL come down on Kirk Cousins? Will the Vikings come down on Kirk Cousins? You heard the Nutcracker here speak about what his office would be like this morning. What is the next steps here for the NFL and the Vikings?
Well, listen, at the end of the day, right, the Vikings need to take action. The NFL probably is going to, put some pressure on them. We all know, based on the history of the NFL, not all players are treated the same. But, back to the Kirk Cousins discussion, I talked to a coach recently, and he made a very good point. He said, the players are probably going to be fine if they were to get it, right? They're so young, they're healthy, they're vibrant. But, it's the other people in the organization that are really at risk. These coaches are older. They're not in the picture of health. Kurt's family, things of that nature, comorbidity is a big issue. So to be a little bit silly and cavalier, I get it. We're all kind of worn out. But at the same time, when you're in an organization and you got 200, 300, 400 people around you in direct contact with you, you got to be a little bit more responsible. And even if you feel like survival of the fittest, it's not going to affect me, it's not going to kill me. Well, what about the next person? What about someone in your family? I just had a friend pass away, diabetic. He was fine, 56 years old, got it and died, right? So this is serious. And young people and young, healthy people are probably going to be fine, but it's the domino effect that you got to worry about. And whether the NFL or the Vikings get involved and come down, that's beyond my pay grade, but we all know that not everyone's treated the same.
No doubt. And, John, I'll give you the final word on this. That still does have to be negotiated, the daily COVID testing. But will we see discipline? I have a feeling this is going to be a story that dominates the headlines for much of the news day here today.
Like I said, I think it just boils down to if, does it come from the NFL or does it come from the Vikings? Like I said, you can respect the factor, and I would, if that was a quarterback on my roster, I would respect his opinion to have his say on things. And then as an organization, you would have to decide if you want to respect that enough to put the rest of your team at risk, and possibly do what we talked about last week when it came to a different subject matter, but to say, hey, Kurt, I'm all for you deciding if you do or do not want to wear your mask. What I need you to do is go in the room there with the other 80 guys and tell them that's how you're going to handle your business. And I'm going to close the door. And, if you come out alive, you do. And if you want to wear your mask after talking to your teammates, well, then you might want to wear it. But I think you have to give the players, the freedom to have their opinion. But then as an organization, if this isn't met today with something from the Vikings, then it's a moot point. And they're telling you, much like we've seen across the board, money and your position counts more than, any of this other stuff that would seemingly be much more important, but we're going to cater to our starting quarterback and let that be out there. Well, the problem is, it's not just your teammates. It's not just the others. It's the factor that, like it or not, Kirk Cousins is in a very prominent position, around sports, which then has, how do I know Justin Fields, or how do I know, that some high school quarterback, or how do I know even some kid playing flag football, in Eden Prairie is not going to say, well, Kirk Cousins said it's okay to do it. Why can't I? And I think that's the dangerous part of this is, to know that maybe you are trying to be funny, or, maybe you are legitimately not really caring about it and, and don't think it will affect you. But in this day and age, you kind of probably have to think a little more about others, because to me, it would show more about the person and your personality if you told me I don't care enough about it to whatever happens to my teammates because of it. So, okay, like the best follow-up question would have been, okay, forget about you getting it. What if one of your teammates gets it? What if one of your teammates' families gets it, because of something that you're doing? Now what's your opinion? Is it that same 0.001%? Like, I'm not going to live my life in fear and whatever. Like I said, we'll see today, because if it's not the Vikings doing it, it's going to tell you no one else is going to say anything about it if the Vikings don't. And it's also very much the type, for the NFL Network or the brand to sort of, bite their tongue when they feel like they're a little too close, to actually taking an opinion or taking a side on something, so not sure, that, Kyle Brandt will want to ruffle too many feathers, because, that's not a good way to get future guests.
Well, I'm sure he'll be grateful for the downloads that he gets off of the Buzz this morning. We'll continue to monitor that situation. I do have the latest NFL and NFLPA COVID monitoring test results that they published yesterday from August 21st to August 29th. They administered 58,621 tests. There are currently now 4 positives amongst players in the league and 6 new confirmed positives amongst personnel. So that's where we are with the state of the NFL COVID. We shift gears here on the State of Football, brought to you by the NFLDraftBible.com. Have you downloaded the virtual edition? We've got almost 300 scouting reports in the can. Oh my God, it's only September 2nd. It's your best resource. You want to get an early jump on those Pac-12 and Big Ten prospects? Hey, we've got them in the can for you. So get down on it. Speaking of the Big Ten, David, a little push, shove, nudge, phone call from the president into Kevin Warren's office there. President Trump taking to Twitter, surprise, surprise, to announce that, hey, we're at the 1 yard line. We've got football coming on our way in the Big Ten. The Big Ten putting out a statement that, yes, we did talk to the president. However, we will resume play at a safe time when the conference is ready. Yes, there is still some talk about Thanksgiving startup there in the Big Ten, but the more realistic option still remains the kind of January startup. Again, you see every conference kind of taking it a different approach. The Pac-12, oh, by the way, remains dead silent. But your take here from the President Trump phone call into Kevin Warren.
I'll say this. There's so many issues going along and around our country right now. I do not need my president of these United States involved in football right now. There's so much other stuff that with the social justice issues, the pandemic economics that are going on that I would like his attention on, and staying out of football is my opinion. I don't need him making those calls. I would love for other people to handle this kind of business and leave. If he can put Mike Pence on the governor's call every day, he can probably put somebody else in his organization on the Big Ten call. He doesn't need to be doing it. I'd rather his attention be somewhere else helping our economy out, because the stock market is not the economy as much as he likes to talk about it that way. So anyways, but as far as what I found interesting with the COVID and the NFL, I think it really shows the leadership in the NFL, doing these small bubbles right now, and what we saw in the NBA and WNBA, the bubbles are working. And so that just proves social distancing and testing and mask wearing is what's working. Look at the numbers you just read off. If all of society were to follow this example, where we had mask testing, mask wearing, and then social distancing, we could defeat COVID in a very strong way and get back to what we want to our normal to be. And these bubbles are showing it. They're showing it. They're proving it. And people don't want to give them enough credit for sports to prove them that it's doing that. So, it is proving it. The other part of it is, I read Ed Orgeron yesterday, I think it was, or maybe this morning, that he was saying his offensive line has been hit really hard with COVID. And last week, Lincoln Riley alluded that his offensive line got hit really hard with COVID. So you're seeing the trenches where social distancing isn't possible being hit the hardest in these college teams when it comes to practicing and COVID, which is, I think, a major factor that we have to think about, because those are the guys that are more than likely to be obese, have some sort of other cause or some other symptoms that might affect them harder. As a man that sits here today with a heart issue, if I get COVID, it becomes a really big issue for me and my family. So as you know, Rick, when I flew around this year and did my ANC, I had my N95 mask on from when I got in the Lyft or the Uber that picked me up at my house till I got to my hotel room in whatever city we were. And then I would take another shower, scrub down before I do anything else, just to be cautious of this. I think people in our country are getting fatigued on everything, and they need to understand that we need to stay diligent because we're not over it. Yes, we'll never be over it because it's a virus, but we're not even close to being with the vaccine. That is one that can be administered on a mass level that will help people, like a flu shot that helps people. But again, every time you look at the mortality rate in our country, every influenza season, it peaks, right, because of the virus, and it comes around. So what I'm long-winded answer, I don't need my president on the phone talking football. I need my president on the phone fixing the economy, getting this pandemic finally under control, helping create equality around this country, so the social justice issue can be one that ends in a positive way, that we can all walk down the street safely in our societies.
Well, we've talked about the need for leadership in college football. I'll go over to Barry to get his opinion here. I'm not sure that it's supposed to come from the president, Barry, but at the end of the day, whether or not Kevin Warren and the Pac-12 commissioner, whether or not these guys have full authority to make the call or not, jobs are going to be on the line here. And we don't know. Either the SEC, ACC, and Big 12 are either going to be extremely right or extremely wrong. And the Big 10 and the Pac-12 are going to be on the exact opposite side, however the verdict comes. And people are going to lose jobs here. So do you appreciate the president getting involved? Where do you fall? Should the Big 10 be playing? It seems like we've been debating this almost each and every day here on the state of football.
Yeah, man, what a loaded question. Thanks, man. Listen, I think David's absolutely right. I think David's 100% correct. You know, the executives and leadership of this country have other things to worry about than college football or the NBA or the NFL or Major League Baseball. At the same time, right, each conference needs to make its own decision. Somebody's got to go first, whether it's now or in January or next season. And the truth is we don't know, right? All these offensive linemen getting this shows you that we don't know what we're doing right now. And we can't guarantee safety of these guys, right? So maybe the right answer, unfortunately, is not to play. I don't like that. Nobody likes that. But gosh, what if one of those guys does have an undiagnosed heart issue? Or one of those guys does die? Or one of his parents get it? For football, we can figure out the job situation. We can bridge people for another 6 or 12 months. But gosh darn it, what are we going to do? You know, we can test every day. The NFL seems to be great at testing, but obviously the college guys aren't testing, right? And the technology to protect the players, whether it's a respirator or a mask or a shield or something, it's not affordable to even some of these big college programs. And so, you know, I don't know what the right answer is, but certainly we're not ready. If you told, would you tell 100 young men to go out and play football tomorrow? You can't. And so I don't know when the right answer is going to come about. I don't know when the technology is going to catch up or when we're going to have a vaccine. But gosh, could you imagine putting those players on the field and them or their families or one of those coaches getting sick, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think at the end of the day, the NFL is proving that it can be done safe and effectively, and they get paid big bucks to do it. But as far as I'm concerned, John, when you start trotting out the football team and the campuses are closed to the students, we've talked about this. As far as I'm concerned, it's the end of amateurism. It is no longer an amateur sport.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is you see there's such a variety, you know, with the NFL, they're basically telling these guys, you can live in a hotel for free, you know, 5-star hotel for free, you know, and have all this coverage. Or the veteran guys are driving back home, can pay for anything in the world that they want, delivered or other, you know, or have their significant other or somebody involved in their circle handling all that business, so that literally you're at the complex, you're at home, you're at the complex, you're at home. The problem is with college life, when they start introducing students, other faculty, other people there, the number of people that it costs to be running your whole facility, players, coaches, staff, but then you need security, and then you need the janitorial services, and then you need the people cleaning that are coming in. You're running out of people that you can bubble or kind of know exactly what they're doing, you know, and who went for Chipotle and who went to Burger King and then who went to pick up their laundry and then who went to go get gas, and you know, how many of them are listening to Kirk Cousins' podcast, you know, and wearing or not wearing their own mask when they're doing all these different things. Because now look, You have LSU guys that are having some COVID issues. You have the big dudes who are quoted saying, I can't really practice or do stuff with this other mask on. It's a jumble to deal with, and I'm having to take my helmet on and off between reps or between sets because I'm dying in here with the humidity and a COVID mask. So we don't know how to, these are brand new masks. Some of them are being created by people that were not in that business. Other ones are people who have, Oakley is somewhat in that business. They've tried to go to people that were involved creating hockey shields to try to figure out how do you deal with the humidity or the cold weather, when it comes, and guys inhaling and exhaling, and stuff like that. But, anything to change with your equipment is going to make guys a little bit, anxious to deal with it. Not to mention it's 90 and humid in Baton Rouge when you're practicing, and so now you have that. Now go to Auburn. Auburn, all of a sudden, this spike in their testing, if you tell me that's not connected to the factor that they tried to put school back in some normal way, shape, or form, it's, kids are interacting with each other. They have friends outside of the football team. People show up. There's new people on campus. They're interacting. They have their own lives there that you can't shrink wrap the football facility away from other people walking back and forth, around campus. And the same people that are cleaning classrooms or the gym or the field area or wherever these players are also interacting with the other people that are working on campus. So I think it's a totally different lifestyle, that you're living college-wise, which is why you see spikes. It's happened at Auburn now. 16, I think, guys, are out of action at the moment. It's happened with Notre Dame. It's happened with NC State, North Carolina. All these people, where if you're trying to do school and the general public and the student athletes, nobody's ready for that yet, because the only people we're testing on the regular are the student athletes and the coaches and the staff. We're not routinely getting the kid who's heading to chemistry class or, poetry class is not taking a COVID test every day, because there's no money to be made there. There's only money to be made if we get these guys kicked off, in September. So are they going to play? Yes, they're going to play. Literally come hell or high water, they are going to play. So, that part, we should kind of take the step over, and say the idea of should we play or not play, we're already past that, because we have a completely incompetent system in place that didn't just say, no, we're pushing it off until a later date. The NFL guys go to the NFL and we'll have college football whenever it's safe for everybody to play. We didn't get that. We're not going to get it now. And when Kevin Warren and the other commissioners see that Kevin Warren and the people out in the Pac-12 are getting eviscerated the way they are, they're not shutting it down at the ACC level. They're not shutting it down in the Big 12 or the SEC unless 86 of their players have COVID positive tests, in which case they'll turn the game and play it the following week, right? We've already come, through the part of saying, are we putting people's safety at risk? Yes. The answer is yes. So if it's not out there, if you can't find it on the internet, let me just give you the word and the answer. Yes, we are willing to risk people's lives to play college football. The answer is yes. That's already been dealt with. It's happening. It happened last week. The best player, in all likelihood, the best player on Austin Peay, their All-American receiver, stayed back last week because he potentially was either around somebody or around somebody who may or may not have tested positive, and they still played a game between Austin Peay and Central Arkansas, for God's sake, with a kid who might have been around somebody or around somebody who knew somebody who got COVID. That didn't shut everything down. They left one guy behind, and they went out and played. Now, if you want to ask yourself a really interesting question, because it has nothing to do with the COVID, but everything to do with dollars and cents, how will LSU feel if they play minus their two DBs potentially, minus their star receiver, minus their defensive tackle, and they go 5-5. Now, how will they feel about their season if they just have to play with what they have left? Because that's what's going to happen with these schools. If you're going to play, you're not going to be able to opt out as a university. You know, if your real guys just say, well, I can't do this, I don't want to play. Because it's one thing to see what we're seeing in pro sports where even the worst team is still showing up, right? Like even that team that's down 3-0, has 9 wins out of 35 baseball games, they're still showing up. What's that college football team who's 0-7 going to look like showing up for 3 last games, dealing with all of this stuff?
Well,
Rick, can I add
yeah,
something?
final word. Go ahead, Barry.
I appreciate it. Listen, there's 2 reasons why the NFL, the MLB, and the National Basketball Association are able to do what they did. There's 2 reasons. One is they've got a single organizing body, right? One organization that has stepped up and is in control of those leagues. And the other reason is because the players have a single advocate, their Players Association. And you don't have any of that in the NCAA. You don't have any advocate for the players. None whatsoever. Nobody's looking out for the players as a whole. It's been a problem for 100 years. 100 years. I remember Steve Spurrier, when I was at the University of Florida, said the players should be paid. They're making all this money. Now, you can make the argument about education and what have you, but the bottom line is it's a money-making organization. And the NCAA has not come up and said, this is the plan. This is what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to ensure safety. They haven't. Each conference has its own agenda. Each school has its own agenda. And there's not one single person that has stepped up to advocate for all these players. They're not organized. They're not being treated fairly. And I think that maybe it's going to take somebody to die, unfortunately, from an avoidable situation. And even then, it might not happen. But the truth is, you can do the bubble with the Basketball Association. You can punish the players and shame the players in Major League Baseball for going out to a strip club and getting COVID. But gosh darn it, there's too much going on in the NCAA for them to make. I'm mad. I'm really frustrated about this. My skin is boiling. And it's been a problem for years. And now you got offensive linemen on major organizations getting sick. You got there's a thing in math called the factorial, and John mentioned this earlier. Every circle that expands by 1 is much more difficult to control. And the risk is much higher for not only the players and the coaches and the staff and the cleaning crew and the vendors, but for everybody else in the community. I've got one of my daughters in college right now. We're scared as heck, but you know what? They're actually following the rules. But it's a controlled environment, much more controlled than what we're seeing across the country with this here and that there and this rule here. So it's very frustrating as a parent and as a citizen and as a fan to see this fragmented, uncontrolled, unorganized situation. I understand why it's happening, but it still makes me mad.
Well, hey, it's the lack of leadership is why we're still here talking about it on the State of Football, giving us plenty to discuss and break down here each and every weekday. Barry Robert Ozer of Magnolia Capital Partners. Of course, we always appreciate the time. I know you've got some other prerogatives and priorities, so go get yourself a glass of cold water and cool down there, Barry, and I'm sure we'll have you back on the show here soon. We appreciate the time here today.
All right, guys. See ya. Thanks.
See you, Barry.
All right, we transition back to the NFL here on the State of Football, brought to you by the NFLDraftBible.com. We have a very special guest here joining us today. We're so grateful for his time, one of the best in the business. He is Omar Kelly of the Sun Sentinel, covering the Dolphins for many, many years. Omar, welcome into the show. We appreciate you taking some time here.
Thank you. No problem. I'm a fan of you guys' work.
We appreciate that, and we've been following you forever. I'll start it off because COVID has dominated the headlines. I do want to talk some Dolphins football, but someone who has been on the beat for so many years, how challenging has it been for you, especially a week like today? Roster cuts coming on Saturday. Obviously, being around the team, the more you can find out, the more you can pick people's brains, the more you can learn. What's been the transition and the challenges in the COVID world?
I think from an environmental standpoint, I think I feel safer in the Dolphins facility or around it than I do anywhere else in the public, because I know everybody is being tested. I know generally everybody in that environment is safe, and they do have 6 feet in terms of distance. I'm a tier 3. And I can't even go into tier 2 area where my colleague is. I swear we have to go on lunch dates to actually see one another. So that's been good in terms of creating a healthy environment, which makes me a little bit more comfortable that I believe football will go on. But in terms of access information, it's been horrible, a disaster, to the point where we're actually approaching the NFL about, the fact that the organization is limiting us in terms of who we can talk to. And I understand there's a Zoom environment, but we should be able to put in requests to get players that we haven't talked to at all this offseason, like Xavier Howard, or players that have been traded like Anthony Shaheen, who's been here for a month and we have not had any access to. Like yesterday, they gave us the kicker. And I'm like, okay, but there's no ability to make adjustments. The day that Ryan Fitzpatrick was out, they gave us players that didn't matter when we really needed to talk to Rosen and Tua about their day of practice. So, I understand this is circumstances that nobody can control, but I think we can all do a better job, in terms of navigating this environment.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, Omar, got the teal shirt rocking for you. When
we went to video, I figured I had to improve the wardrobe and take off my what they call a wife beater, my tank top, or cover it up.
It depends. You'd call it pop or cola. It depends on where you're at, what you call those shirts.
It's a guinea tea here in Jersey, so.
What is it in Jersey?
A guinea tea.
God.
A guinea tea. I've never heard that.
Yeah, you can only say that if you're by the Jersey, literally living on the Jersey Shore.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So, we never thought we'd be talking about, COVID related and being socially distanced, although being socially distanced from Barry Jackson probably isn't the worst thing in the world for you, at times. He'll love that. Here's something more, way more important. And we've had, some really good conversations about this in past times. And unfortunately now they've come back, and right in our face. As an African-American covering the NFL, how or what do you think will happen? We heard Russell Wilson and his opinion of what would have happened. We've heard some other guys say if we had a game last week, it would have been really tough to play. What happens if a certain number of guys on a Friday or Saturday say we're not playing? How do you think an NFL or the NFL in general, from your time covering it, what do you think the reaction to that will be, and how do you think it'll go down?
I don't think there's any chance, any possible way you would see an NFL cancel a week of games because of some social justice issue. It's just not the climate that is accepted. Even the players, the mentality of the players is employer when they should be viewing themselves as partners. I just don't. There's not strong enough leadership in the NFLPA or amongst the players, rank and file. The last thing that the NFLPA wants to do is void this wonderful now 10-year agreement that they've created with the NFL, which protects them from the downturn in the economy. So I understand that the NBA and some Major League Baseball teams said, hey, we're not playing, but I just could not see it in the climate of the NFL, because most of these guys, people don't realize this, but most of these players in the NFL are thousandaires. They're not millionaires. You know, you might be talking about 16 guys on every NFL roster in training camp who are millionaires, and everybody else is a thousandaire. So just the economics of it, I don't think it leads to sort of strong empowerment of the African Americans, who can step away from the game and say, hey, we're not playing this week in terms of to create a statement.
Omar, really quick, you're with the team that I kicked off with in 2002. I was with the Dolphins. That was my first organization. So, little nostalgic for me this morning, thinking about Davey and all that stuff down there with Harvey Green leading the media and everything back in the day. So, but for me, I've taken very hard stance through all my podcasts and everything on the social justice issue. And I think equality is something that we really need to strive for. How likely, if we don't see a nation or a system-wide shutdown on suspending games, would players literally not play on, like, can we see big name players saying we're not playing this Sunday because we don't want to show up to work? And again, those are the millionaires. If you get the quarterbacks together and the quarterbacks decide not to play, that will be a huge impact on every game that week. Is there a possible position where certain players or position groups would take that league wide to bring the social justice to the forefront?
I think it's funny that you said that, but I think it would have to be the quarterbacks. I think the show goes on with everybody else. But if the quarterback stepped up and said for all 32 teams, hey, we're not playing this week, I have a hard time believing that they would put a product on the field. So to me, funny you say that, but I think it would have to be the quarterbacks who, and, I don't know if they're at that point. Maybe I don't even think that's even a consideration at this point. But it's something drastic would have to happen between now and the season opener for the NFL to really step up. I think they're probably making plans in terms of what they're going to do from a league-wide standpoint. The Dolphins have had a kneeling player every year since 2016, when Colin Kaepernick has basically decided to kneel to create awareness about social justice issues and police brutality. And I'm pretty confident that they will continue to have kneeling players, but I don't know if there's going to be anything in terms of cancellation of games. Maybe they'll use the first game to create some kind of awareness and statement. And I think the NFL is behind that, or will be behind that. We'll see.
Well, I know Troy Vincent came out yesterday and I talked about how players have the right to sit. They don't, then no repercussions or anything will happen to them. And with some predominant teams now having black quarterbacks, I mean, even if it's not 32 quarterbacks, but it's the black quarterbacks one week saying, hey, we're not going to play. I mean, that means Kansas City, Baltimore, and, Seattle and Houston are all going to be without their starting quarterbacks. And again, on that note, have you been following what the Ravens are doing as an organization and leading the way, in my opinion, on making sure that they're putting their power behind political they should be using their power to push political agendas with as an organization. How do you feel about the Ravens organization?
I actually haven't paid attention. I don't know what the Raiders organization have been doing, to be honest with you. I've been so focused on training camp. And honestly, as heavy as everything has been with what's going on in the country, and with COVID on top of it, I personally have to distance myself from it. It's too heavy. It's too much of a toll on my emotional state, my mental state. So I'm sort of distancing myself from it. In fact, I haven't written any of the stories related to it just because I don't want to touch it. I don't want to bring that into my space because honestly, I'm just struggling to hold it all together as it is right now, as an African-American male with a wife who works in the healthcare industry at a hospital treating COVID patients every day. I'm just struggling to hold it all together. And I think, to me, I can't even imagine what a player has to go through, which is why when the NBA decides to take a step back and say, hey, we're not playing till Saturday, giving these players an opportunity to kind of unload this stuff. I think that's a healthy thing, because we have to be in a healthy space in order to be at our best at whatever our job is. And me personally, I know right now I'm not at a healthy state. So I know what I can and I cannot handle. And to be honest with you, I probably haven't watched the news for maybe a week and a half. I just can't handle it.
Well, that makes you smarter than the rest of us, Omar.
Yeah.
Well, hey, we appreciate you here. We want to talk some football with you, which is why we had you on. Omar Kelly, Sun Sentinel, best beat reporter on the Dolphins for many, many years. Omar, I'm going to take it. You know, this is such a young team. They had so many draft picks. Preston Williams, though, is a guy coming out last year that we had a top 100 grade on. Obviously,
top
some
100
problems
grade in the draft.
Yeah.
Why did somebody needs to explain to me why he didn't get drafted? Because he's very good. I would put him without a doubt top 5 receiver on the team. I would debate with you whether or not he's better than Devontae Parker. If he can stay healthy for 16 games, no doubt in my mind he'll be a 1,000-yard receiver. The numbers are going to be gaudy. I don't understand how he didn't get drafted, because we know people in the NFL, they'll draft a murderer. They'll draft somebody who has committed murder. And somehow this talented young man, I know he only had one productive season at Colorado State, but like he can do it all. And I'm quite surprised. I kind of was playing it down last year in terms of what I was seeing. And I was like, okay, beginner's luck. He does push off a lot. It's very subtle though. So I'm like, they're not gonna call this. They're not gonna let him do this in the NFL in a game, and they let him push off. And I was kind of surprised. He's out there running wrong routes and still being productive, and it seems like he's taking his game up to another level after the ACL injury. And I'm quite impressed. I got to be honest.
Oh, I can answer that.
Either he's really good, or Byron Jones is one hell of a catfish.
Whoa.
Well, he was in my area when I was scouting for the Panthers, so I could tell you the young man's a little eccentric, and he had some off the field stuff. Plus, he had some injuries that attested to why his draft stock fell down, because they couldn't bank on him being a guy who wasn't going to be injury prone his whole career, and the off field stuff. Even though he met the challenge and did everything to correct it.
Domestic violence, yes.
Right. But as soon as, to his credit, as soon as he got all the rules and what he had to do, he followed the rules to get back on. He practiced with the team, everything to make his teammates better. And he showed up, and he was great that way off the field. But, it's just like, what are you getting as far as character? What are you getting as far as injuries? And then he's eccentric on top of it, where, will your coaching staff be able to
eccentric. Define eccentric.
This is a man that would show up at like his coach or call his coach at 2 a.m. saying he's just at the Waffle House thinking about, life, and in a way in which the coach answers the phone thinking like, why aren't you at home sleeping? Why are you at the Waffle House thinking about life at 2 a.m. and calling your coach to do that? So, and then, he was a theater major. So when we did his testing in Colorado, it was a hot day. He showed up in a tank top, but he had a scarf around his neck and a pair of shorts and then a pair of tennis shoes on that were like all different, and just kind of like, what's this get up? Like, I don't know what I'm getting right now. It was,
I mean, I do sense there's a little bit of uniqueness to him.
Yeah.
But I've been in NFL locker rooms for over a decade now, and nobody cares about the unique play. If you produce, like, you could show up like Cam Newton, and nobody would care.
Right. And again,
produce.
But again, when you're drafting a guy, you don't know how your coaching staff's going to relate to him. You don't know if they're going to teach him, how he's going to learn for them. So then you're like, okay, on top of the other stuff we talked about, that makes it hard. Now, I was super shocked that he wasn't drafted. I mean, because, you you found gems like Marquise Colston in the 6th round or whatever. It's like this guy could have easily been a 5th, 6th round pick, even with everything else. Because at that point, he has the production, he has the size. He went to Tennessee. I mean, there was some positive drug tests too. So, like I said, there's a lot of some baggage that came with him.
So you're saying he had too many. He had to pay the $50 check-on fee because he had a 3rd bag of luggage in the NFL.
Exactly. Yeah, he flew Southwest and he got the 3rd bag fee. So if he was flying American, it would have been like $200. Just saying.
Well, John,
he's a talented young man.
Very.
I have watched him dominate practice coming off an ACL injury, and I'm like, And to be honest with you, he has made me question how good Byron Jones is.
Yeah, well,
he's really good, or Byron Jones is Byron Maxwell.
And I remember the Draft Bible debate when he came out. I know we were going to put a 1st round grade on him, and my staff had to reel me in and say, hey, this guy probably isn't going to get drafted. Let's just put a round 3 grade on him and call it a day. And I think this guy is one of the, if you play fantasy football and Preston Williams isn't on your radar, well, hey, there's a guy I think is going to produce. Omar, I know we're going overtime with you. John has one final question for you. We appreciate the time. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, so the one thing one of the things that makes you a different kind of guy in terms of covering the team is that you're not just covering what you're told or what, kind of what's the everyday stuff that everybody else sees. You've always had a really good way of seeing the game or seeing what's happening with them before the fans or the rest of the people around. So now it's a lot more difficult without seeing every practice, and there's no preseason games. What is there a guy, like I think Chris Greer, we were mentioning them, between free agency and the draft, and then how they handled themselves at the draft and looking like they hit on a lot of guys, that were guys that they probably were surprised at times, were there, at different points of the draft. Is there somebody on that O-line? Is there somebody defensively? Is there somebody that kind of has stood out, to you that you're saying like, hey, it's a lot of Tua, obviously there's a lot of talk about skill guys and the brand new guys that they paid for in the secondary. But, is there somebody, O-line or linebacker or pass rusher that, you will not be surprised that is a breakout performer this year for the Dolphins?
No question about it. I think Solomon Kinley, let's just go down my list. Solomon Kinley is going to be a decent starting offensive guard right away out the gate. I keep watching him at practice, wondering when he's going to wilt to this heat and humidity, and he doesn't. And so I would expect him to be a day one starter and probably one of the more impressive rookie offensive linemen in the NFL. Austin Jackson is there's a little bit of struggle there. You can tell he's not really ready for the bright lights. Malcolm Perry, the Navy quarterback that they've turned into a receiver and a gadget player, you can see the talent, the ability to make people miss is there. It's just how long is it going to take him to learn how to run routes and learn how to be a slot player. And Landon Roberts is a guy who you saw them make that Raekwon McMillan trade. It's because Roberts made McMillan expendable. This was a guy, if McMillan didn't play on special teams, I'm not sure he would be active on a weekly basis. So they really had to move him. And I think the emergence of Roberts, I see him actually being paired with Jerome Baker as the 2 every down linebackers. And then you've got Kyle Van Noy kind of being an edge player for the Dolphins this season. I don't see him being an inside linebacker. So that's going to be atop my list in terms of things that I watch. And another name for you, I think Brandon Jones, the safety from Texas. I think he's got a chance to emerge there as a starting strong safety. Intelligent guy, got a decent amount of ability. I'm not necessarily certain they're comfortable with what Eric Rowe is showing them as a strong safety. More as a rover, he's excelling. As a tight end coverage specialist, he's excelling. But strong safety, run fits, I don't see that.
Yeah, Brandon Jones, a guy, again, before the injury, is very high on a lot of draft boards. I had a chance to see Austin Jackson at USC last year. I didn't really feel like he was a first-round talent, but it just the body, the clay, right? You can mold it, and develop it, and grow it.
First-round talent.
Yeah,
Top 50 talent, yes. first rounder, a little bit of a stretch. And I think you're going to see him go through some struggles. If he was your right tackle, I would say he's fine. He's adequate. Your left tackle, we could be looking at some issues here.
Yeah, I felt the same way. And Malcolm Perry, I like that you brought him up because I do think that's a guy, again, so raw. But when you talk about being able to make plays with the ball in your hand, by the time we start getting to week 12, week 14, week 17, this is going to be a contributor to the team, I feel. So great insight. Omar, I know you're one of the best Twitter follows at Omar Kelly. Any parting shots for the people here before we wrap things up?
Just, it'll be interesting to see what happens in terms of the world moving forward, whether we go vaccine, whether we just have to go social immunity. Wear your mask, protect yourself, isolate yourself. If you don't go around your grandparents or your elderly parents too often if you're out in the world. And let's just be smart and care about one another and vote. Definitely vote.
Great messages there. We definitely appreciate the time again. And our thoughts go out to you and your family with your wife working on the front lines. We thank her so much. And we thank you so much for the great work that you do and the hard work, time, effort that you put into covering the Dolphins and being one of the best minds in the NFL. Make sure you go follow him at Omar Kelly. This is The State of Football, Part 23. We'll be back at it again tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern. I want to thank all of our guests today, Barry Robert Ozer, David Turner, John Murphy. For Rick Saratella, we'll see you